August 5th, 1955, Wolfsburg, Germany. 100,000 people jam the factory gates, bands blare, cameras flash. A gold-painted Beetle with rhinestone bumpers rolls off the line. The crowd roars. 10 years earlier, this same place was hell. April 11, 1945, 3 in the afternoon. American troops arrive. A French forced labourer writes in his diary, "They're here, they're here." Nearly 8,000 prisoners and deportees walk out to air that smells of spring and broken sewers. The sheds stand, scarred, looted, but standing. And across Germany, in kitchen drawers, stamp books sit fat and useless. Save 5 marks a week and you will be driving your own car. Hundreds of thousands kept that promise. Not one of them got a car. So how did the Nazi car become the love bug? How did a factory built on stolen labour and broken promises become the stage for a gold celebration a decade later? Short answer: 2 thefts, 1 reversal. First theft, money. The regime took deposits for a car it never delivered. Second theft, freedom. The factory filled its lines with people who weren't free. The reversal: a British engineer walked into the wreckage, painted a Beetle army green, and secured a 20,000 car order. The line restarted. The town survived. Now the long answer. So the celebration, the debts, and the green car all make sense. Let's start with the promise. May 1938. A cornerstone goes into the ground beside the Mittelland Canal. Fallersleben, later renamed Wolfsburg, a model city and a giant plant rise together. The vision is Ford's River Rouge translated to Germany. Everything feeding one line, building one product. The people's car, the Volkswagen. And here's how you get one. Buy a 5 Reichsmark stamp each week. Paste it in your booklet. Fill 5 booklets, just under 1,000 Reichsmarks total. Add 200 more for insurance. Wait your turn. Pick it up at the factory. Dark blue-grey only, no home delivery. The brochures are beautiful. Families queue to sign up. The booklets come home and live in kitchen drawers. By the end of 1939, 250,000 people have enrolled, most are middle class. 1/3 already own a car. But the stamp book represents something larger, a bet on the future. A regime that says it can deliver prosperity, a promise that looks solid. Then September 1939. War. Civilian deliveries halt. The stamp books keep filling, but the line no longer builds the car it sold. Prototypes, the round KDF cars from newsreels, go to Nazi elites and parades. The factory flips to war production, Kubelwagen, Schwimmwagen, aircraft repair, V1 rocket components. Here's what the data shows. Barely 600 civilian cars during the entire war, almost all for officials and propaganda. More than 65,000 military vehicles for the front, 100 times as many military vehicles as promised civilian cars. And here's what the data also shows. New subscriptions to the savings program collapse by 3/4 in the first year of war. They never recover. People aren't stupid. The refusal to save reflects something. Anxiety about a regime growing more bellicose by the month. The booklets in the kitchen drawer become a bet on something slipping away. Some keep paying through 1945, believing in final victory, or just unable to write off what they've already spent. But it slowly dawns on them. The promised KDF wagons are a product of a fallen regime. The nearly 300 million Reichsmarks they've paid, sitting untouched in a Berlin bank. Until 1945, when Soviet forces take the city, and the money vanishes into the Russian zone. So that's the first theft. Money taken under a promise that was never kept. Now, the second theft. The factory still needs to produce war machines, but German workers are being drafted to fight. The regime's solution? Import labor. And when import doesn't work, seize it. October 1941. The factory requests Soviet prisoners of war. By spring 1942, trains from Stalag 11D, Fallingbostel, start arriving. Names enter the ledgers in careful handwriting. Vladimir Andrushenko, Alexander Mingalyev. A rail stop, a registration, a section assignment, a bunk that smells of oil and wet wool. Here's how the money works. The company pays the Wehrmacht roughly £0.50 per hour for a POW's labour, enough to buy a single loaf of bread. The prisoner receives a token amount in camp money, too small to buy a full meal. Then the tiers. Western workers from Belgium, Netherlands, France, conditions just tolerable enough. Eastern workers, Poles, Ukrainians, Russians, harsher rations, harsher rules. Soviet POWs at the very bottom. When Mussolini falls in 1943, Italian construction workers who'd once built the factory on equal wages return as military internees, treated no better than Soviet prisoners. For 6 months in 1942, the factory literally contains a concentration camp, Arbeitsdorf. 800 prisoners, enough to fill 3 large apartment blocks. It closes when a foundry plan falls through, but the fact of it stays in the plant's threads. By late April 1944, here's the roster. More than 17,000 workers total. Over 11,000 are foreigners. Most are there against their will. 2/3 of the workforce. Signs divide doors, latrines, rations. Punishment is policy. The quietest cost? In Felbke and Rouen, foreign children's homes take infants born to Polish and Soviet mothers. Hunger is policy. Watery soup, not enough milk, rows of cots where ledgers count little bodies like lost shipments. After the war, a British military court issues sentences, some prison, some death. No verdict brings a child back. So now you see it. 2 thefts, 2 kinds of debt. The regime took money from German savers who believed the promise. It took freedom and often life from people who had no choice at all. When American troops arrive on April 11, 1945, they find a factory built on both, and everyone who looks at it says the same thing: tear it down. The Americans hand it to the British. Occupation zones drawn at Potsdam put Wolfsburg in the British sector. The Soviets visit, assess the rubble, move on. The Americans want nothing to do with it. On June 5, 1945, British military government takes trusteeship. The plan? Dismantle it, strip the equipment, ship it back to Britain as reparations. Evaluate whether any of it is worth using. But in August 1945, they send one man to assess what's salvageable before they start cutting it apart. Major Ivan Hirst, 28 years old, Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers. His orders are simple: go to Wolfsburg, find the factory, and sit on it. They don't even tell him it's Volkswagen. What he finds is worse than wreckage. A disgusting smell hung over the whole property, he'll recall. Allied bombing shattered the drainage systems. No one repaired them. Toilets broken, completely unhygienic. Streets overgrown, potholed. The small population lives in barracks. The town isn't just damaged, it's dying. Workers sleep 14 to a room on straw mattresses, often without blankets. Many arrive, look around, leave. Food is scarce. The work is brutal. The conditions are unbearable. But Hirst sees something others don't. His father ran a factory in Oldham, making clocks and optical instruments. small, precise things requiring patience. Hirst knows how to walk through wreckage and hear what still works. First task: remove an unexploded bomb lodged between two irreplaceable pieces of production equipment. One wrong move and it's over. The bomb is lifted out. The machinery stays. He keeps digging. Generator building. Equipment deliberately buried under debris to hide the fact it still functions. Jigs that haven't warped. Presses that can still stamp steel. In a corner workshop, under dust and broken glass, a prototype. He has it cleaned, painted army green, driven to British headquarters at Bielefeld. The British offer the factory to their own manufacturers. A commission comes to inspect, chaired by Sir William Roots. They look at the car, listen to the engine, write their report. The vehicle does not meet the fundamental technical requirement of a motor car. It is quite unattractive to the average buyer. To build the car commercially would be a completely uneconomic enterprise. They offer it to Ford. Henry Ford II comes with Ernest Breech, chairman of the board. Breech looks around, tells Ford, "Mr. Ford, I don't think what we're being offered here is worth a dime." The French show interest. Then a lobby of French carmakers intervenes. Deal collapses. Every door closes. Except Hirst sees what they don't. This isn't about whether the car is beautiful or economical. Look around. Workers sleeping 14 to a room need jobs. A town on the edge of starvation needs this factory to mean something different than what it meant before. Hirst brings a different argument to British command. Not, "This car is good," but "We need 20,000 vehicles to keep our occupation running. This factory can build them, and this region has nothing else." British command considers the logistics, approves the order. December 27, 1945. The line restarts. 55 cars by New Year's Eve. But survival requires more than starting a line. Steel is scarce. Workers weld small sheets together to form roofs. They barter completed cars for glass, rubber, wire, needed to build the next batch. Food is even scarcer. Winter 1946-47 becomes starvation winter. Hundreds of thousands die across Germany. In Wolfsburg, employees collapse from exhaustion. Vitamin deficiencies cause tooth loss. People literally fall apart at their stations. Hirst, working 12-hour days, uses every contact. He wrangles a fish shipment from Hamburg. He persuades commanders to release 1,000 former factory workers from camps. Then he does something no one expects. He authorizes planting cereal crops on factory grounds. Wheat grows between the assembly sheds. The plant becomes part farm, part factory. Coal shortages and brutal cold force a shutdown. Production stops. Generators go dark. Workers wait. March 10, 1947. The line coughs back to life. By March 1946, they hit target. 1,000 cars a month. Hirst organizes dealer networks, spare parts, quality standards. A works council, elected in November 1945, gives German employees a voice. Exports begin in 1947. 56 cars to the Netherlands, then Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, Switzerland. Some dealers laugh at the shape, but the car runs, and keeps running. Hirst leaves in 1949. Years later, asked what he remembers most, he doesn't cite production numbers. He talks about a smell. Fish glue, used to fix cardboard headlinings, gluing fabric to pressboard because that's what they had. Pungent, sharp, everywhere. The smell meant they were making something. The smell meant the line was moving. The smell meant the town had work. But Hirst knows he needs someone who can take it further. Autumn 1947. A meeting in the drawing room of Lisa Present, owner of a Hamburg Opel dealership. The man he interviews, Heinrich Nordhoff. Trained by General Motors at Opel, rose to commercial technical director, presented the Cadet to the public in 1936. During the war, ran Opel's truck plant at Brandenburg. But now, working as a service manager at that Hamburg garage, the Americans barred him from their zone, not because he was a Nazi Party member, which he wasn't, but because he'd received a business award from the regime. They told him he'd never build cars again, consider himself lucky to sweep streets. The Volkswagen had been that Nazi car to him, something he wanted nothing to do with, until General Motors gave him the cold shoulder and the British offered him this one door left open. What drives him? Maybe humiliation. Maybe the engineer's instinct that sees a broken thing and can't help but fix it. Maybe simpler. A man with a family and a skill to prove. He never says. What he shows is enough.
Nordhoff arrives January 1, 1948, one day before his 50th birthday. Colleagues describe manic intensity, 17-hour days, a man who attacks production like a puzzle only he can solve. His philosophy, offering people an honest value, appealed to me more than being driven around by a bunch of hysterical stylists trying to sell people something they really don't want to have. He doesn't argue with critics, doesn't redesign the body. He attacks the production line. First year, doubles output to 19,000. Within 6 years, cuts build time by 3/4, from 400 man-hours to 100. Improves mechanicals, better brakes, tighter seals, stronger engines with higher phosphor content that finally last. Builds a dealer network, prioritizing service over sales. By 1950, 100,000 cars. 1/3 goes to export, 18 countries. The Beetle becomes proof Germany can make something the world wants again. And here's what's happening in West Germany. People need this story. They need the Beetle to represent recovery, not reckoning. They need it to mean something clean. A 1952 Volkswagen advertisement says it plainly. What has made it well known and popular is not its history of origins, but the harmony of its technical and economical features. Not its history of origins. That line is doing a lot of work. West Germans attentively follow how the car becomes a sales hit abroad, registering with relief the affection it inspires. They view it as their unofficial representative on the international stage. The small car appeals because of consistency and trustworthiness. It embodies self-confidence of an emerging consumer society. It gives Germans unprecedented independence. Suddenly, almost everyone can afford a car. By 1955, 1 million Beetles. That gold-painted celebration with 100,000 onlookers, 12 marching bands, Moulin Rouge dancers. The Beetle becomes one of West Germany's few, largely uncontested collective symbols. West Germans hold on to a politically sanitized interpretation. They disconnect the car from National Socialist ideology. They want it to represent sobriety, solidity, normal life returning. The Wirtschaftswunder, the economic miracle. And for a while, that works. By 1961, over 1 million Beetles a year. The car climbs into public affection one honest mile at a time by refusing to break down. But remember those stamp books from the beginning? The savers who never got their cars? They haven't forgotten. A small group led by Karl Stolz presents a legal claim to Volkswagen. We paid for cars. You're building cars. We want credit toward a new one. Volkswagen declines. The new company has no connection to the KDF organization, they say. Stolz persists. The case goes to German High Court in 1954. They rule post-war Volkswagen might be linked
to the pre-war scheme. 4 more years, another appeal. Supreme Court rules Volkswagen is a responsible party and can be sued. Then that ruling gets overturned in 1955. Volkswagen, sick of the publicity, offers goodwill. 250 Deutschmarks cash or 500 credit toward a new car. The savers reject it. Back to Supreme Court. 12 years after the first claim.
October 1961, final settlement ordered. Volkswagen will offer between 150 and 600 Deutschmarks credit toward a new Beetle, depending on stamps collected. About 12% of what the car costs in 1961. Roughly $150 toward a $1,300 car, or between 25 and 100 marks cash. A fraction of what they paid, in currency worth less than what they saved. By 1970, claims are settled, more than 120,000 applicants. Roughly 2/3 take cash, the rest use the discount toward a car. They finally drive away in Beetles, 2 decades late, 12% reimbursed. The stamp books mattered. That's the admission, however small. But remember the other theft? The nearly 8,000 forced labourers who walked out in April 1945? Their reckoning takes even longer. September 1998. Volkswagen does something no other major German firm has done. Establishes a nearly $12 million fund for former forced labourers. Shimon Peres agrees to serve on the board of trustees. Franz Franitzky too. The announcement is careful, acknowledges historical and moral obligations, but stops short of legal liability. That same month, class action lawsuits hit U.S. federal courts. Survivors testify. Ellie Gross, 15 when she arrived at Auschwitz. 12-hour days, painting machinery parts, no pay, breathing fumes that still hurt her lungs 50 years later. Olga Berkowitz. In the factory, they stayed behind me with a stopwatch. If you didn't produce enough, you were sent to Bergen-Belsen to be killed. Morris Newman. Carrying aluminium sheets through snow without gloves, hands freezing to the metal. The lawsuits name not just Volkswagen, but Siemens, Krupp, BMW, Daimler-Benz. The machinery of the German wartime economy. Pressure builds. German companies scramble to raise their share of a proposed joint fund. Negotiations drag. Some firms, especially medium-sized ones, resist. They value legal protection over moral responsibility. By early 2001, German industry is still nearly 1.5 billion marks short of the promised 5 billion. Politicians and union leaders start naming holdouts publicly. August 2, 2000. German Bundestag passes the law creating foundation, remembrance, responsibility and future. Capital, more than 10 billion Deutsche Marks. Half from thousands of German companies, half from federal government. The name avoids reparations, too politically charged. Instead, recognition, responsibility, future. Between 2001 and 2007, payments go out. 7 international partner organizations coordinate across nearly 100 countries. Amounts vary by category. Former concentration camp prisoners, up to €7,600. Forced laborers in industry, about €2,500. Agricultural workers and children taken from mothers, between €500 and €2,200. More than 2 million applications filed. In the end, over 1.5 million survivors or heirs receive payments. Total, €4.5 billion. June 12, 2007. Federal President Horst Köhler
hosts a ceremony marking the end of the payment program. Chancellor Angela Merkel attends. She says, "Many former forced laborers have finally received the promised humanitarian aid." Then admits, before this fund, nothing had gone directly to the victims. Köhler calls it an initiative that was urgently needed along the journey to peace and reconciliation. The money can't undo what was done, but it names the debt aloud, turns a moral fact into something held in a living hand. At the Wolfsburg plant, a permanent place of remembrance is built. The story stays in plain sight.
So now we can answer the question, how did the Nazi car become the love bug? Here's the truth. It didn't. Not really, not completely. The Beetle became beloved because it really was simple, reliable, and cheap to run. Nordhoff's obsessive improvements made it bulletproof. It gave families independence. It refused to break down. It became a symbol because West Germans needed it to represent recovery. They needed to believe they could build something the world wanted. They needed one uncontested thing to rally around. And the Beetle, disconnected from its origins, sanitized in advertising, celebrated in gold paint, gave them that. But overwriting isn't the same as erasing. The savers waited 2 decades for 12% back. The forced laborers waited more than 50 years for any recognition at all. The debts didn't dissolve just because decades passed. The past doesn't vanish just because a new coat of paint looks good. 2 men belong in this accounting. Ferdinand Porsche drew the lines that made the Beetle simple to build. Anton Piech managed the plant. They oversaw production of military vehicles and V1 components. They oversaw a workforce that by 1944 was mostly unfree. French authorities detained both after the war, released without trial. The facts don't fit cleanly in any box, which is exactly why they belong in the story. And one more figure. A British major with a clipboard and a green car. Orders that said, "Sit on it." A bomb lifted between machines. Streets stinking of sewers. Workers sleeping 14 to a room. A fish shipment from Hamburg. Wheat between the sheds. A colonel squinting past skepticism at something that runs. An order that comes. A generator that coughs. A line that rolls. A town that exhales. A small thing that begins to carry a large past. The Beetle is a beloved car. That's real. The charm sits on shoulders that do not smile back. That's also real. You can hold both truths at once. Love the shape, enjoy the stories, know the cost. That doesn't cancel the car. That finishes the story.